BTS News Today. There is no story that shakes the heart more than a love that goes beyond the limits of reason, which burns so strong that it can no longer be contained. That's how Jungkook loves Taehyung. A heartbreaking, crazy, obsessive, and uncontrollable story. Over time, their relationship has developed into something so profound, it goes beyond the usual definitions that words can give. Every look, every touch, and every silence they share is proof of a love that cannot be explained by ordinary logic. Jungkook is a man who always seems calm in front of the camera, but behind it all, there was a storm of feelings constantly raging inside him. Taehyung is the center of all his madness, someone whose existence is so vital, so essential. Without him, Jungkook's world is empty. From the beginning of their togetherness, from the days of strenuous training to the glitter of the world stage, Jungkook could never take his eyes off Taehyung. However, such a great love does not always bring happiness. There were times when the feeling was so painful that Jungkook himself had trouble breathing. The obsession growing inside him was not something he could control. He wants Taehyung just for him, wants to be the only world for the man he always looked at with those longing eyes. However, the world did not go as he wanted. Taehyung, with his free personality, he can never be restrained. He is a wandering soul, talk to whoever he likes, and love life in an unpredictable way. For Jungkook, it was the toughest test. There were nights when he was awake, thinking about what if one day Taehyung left her? What if the smile that was always given to him was now given to someone else? The fear was so real, so haunting, that there was a moment where Jungkook lost control of himself. He once held Taehyung's hand too tightly, once looked at him with eyes so deep that Taehyung himself could not look away. He knew he was falling too deep, but how could he stop him? Among the happiness they share, there is a pain that always lurks. Jungkook loves too much, too afraid of losing. He often feels burned out by his own emotions. He wants Taehyung to understand how deep his feelings are, but what if such a big love is actually scary? What if in the end, Taehyung felt constrained by such a huge fire? However, there is one thing that is always a lifesaver in their story. Taehyung, with all his tenderness and understanding, always knew how to calm the storm inside Jungkook. He understands that Jungkook's love is not just a casual crush or attraction. It was a full-fledged love, thorough and without limits. He knew that Jungkook loved him in a way that no one could understand. And although sometimes it felt too heavy, too intense, Taehyung never really thought about leaving. Because in the end, even though Jungkook's love is heartbreaking, it's crazy, obsessive, and uncontrollable, it remains the most sincere love ever. The love that grows in Jungkook is not just a sense of belonging or a momentary attraction. It was something that was embedded so deeply in his soul, something that is constantly evolving and can never be stopped. When he looked at Taehyung, the world seemed to stop spinning. Every smile etched on the man's face was a reason for Jungkook to keep breathing, stay strong, and live in a world that feels empty without Taehyung by your side. However, there are times when that love feels like punishment. The obsessions that bind Jungkook often make him feel trapped in his own emotional maze. He can't control his desire to always be by Taehyung's side, to make sure that the man is all right, that no one else could replace him in Taehyung's heart. There was a fear that haunted her every step. The fear that one day, Taehyung will find someone who can make him happier than Jungkook. Jungkook knows that the love he has is not healthy. Sometimes, he feels like a crazy person who can't think clearly when it comes to Taehyung. He will feel uneasy when Taehyung talks to others for too long, would feel devastated when he saw the man laughing off without her. But at the same time, he also felt guilty for not being able to control his emotions. He wanted to let Taehyung go free, wanted to see him happy without having to feel burned by the excruciating flames of jealousy, but he couldn't. It is not capable, and Taehyung? Taehyung knows all about it. He saw how Jungkook loved her in such an intense way, so deep, until sometimes it hurts. He understood that behind that loving look, there is an unspoken fear. Jungkook is afraid of losing her, afraid of being abandoned, afraid that one day he won't be the only person who can make Taehyung smile. But Taehyung also knows that Jungkook's love is the most sincere love he has ever received in his life. There is not a single person in this world who loves him like Jungkook loves him. Not a single person will look at him with eyes that seem to want to carve every inch of his face in the heart. who would embrace her so tightly as if the world would collapse if they were separated. That's what makes things even more complicated. Taehyung loves Jungkook, but he is also afraid of the magnitude of that love. He fears that one day, an obsession so strong it will destroy them both. He was afraid that the deeper they were immersed in this love, it is becoming increasingly difficult for them to return to the surface. And yet, despite all that fear there is, even though this love feels so crazy, heartbreaking, and uncontrollably, they keep coming back to each other. No matter how hard the world tries to separate them, no matter how many people try to intervene, they always find a way to come back. Because in the end, Jungkook's love for Taehyung isn't just a story. It's not just a momentary feeling. It is something that has become a part of him, something he can never let go of, no matter how much it hurts, no matter how crazy it gets. Jungkook knew he had fallen too deep. His love for Taehyung is not something that can be controlled or tamed. It grew wild within him, taking possession of every part of his being. He often wondered, is it normal to love someone to the point where his breath feels heavy just because of the thought of loss? Is it natural that every second without Taehyung feels like torture? But no answer could satisfy him, because in the end, he knew that he couldn't stop. There were days when Jungkook felt himself drowning in fear and jealousy. Taehyung is always surrounded by a lot of people, friends, fans, and people who want to get close to him. Taehyung is a magnet for the world, someone who cannot be held in anyone's grasp. Jungkook knows that. But still, whenever I see Taehyung laughing with others, something in him felt broken. He wants to be the only one who makes Taehyung laugh like that, the only place where Taehyung feels safe and comfortable. However, behind his jealousy and obsession, there is also a deep pain. Sometimes Jungkook wonders, does Taehyung understand how big he feels? Does Taehyung know that in every look he gives, there is unspeakable pain? That every time he held Taehyung's hand, he did it with the fear that maybe one day the hand would come off and never come back? Taehyung is not stupid. He knows. He saw how Jungkook loved her in such a horrible way. It was so intense. It was as if love could kill them both. He saw how Jungkook's eyes spoke more than words, how his every touch carries a load that cannot be explained by ordinary logic. And although Taehyung felt touched by that love, there were moments where he felt scared, afraid that one day, Jungkook will be too far lost in his own feelings, afraid that he won't be able to meet the expectations Jungkook puts on him. Taehyung is a free man, someone who doesn't like to be constrained. But when he saw the way Jungkook looked at him, he knew that freedom never really existed. Jungkook has made it his own for a long time. They never talked about this directly. There are no words that can describe the dynamics of their relationship. There is no term that can define the love they have. All they know is that they always come back to each other, regardless of how difficult and painful the journey they went through was. However, there is one thing that always haunts them. The line between love and obsession is so thin. Jungkook knew that he had exceeded that limit many times. He knows that his love for Taehyung has turned into something deeper. It's darker and harder to control.
A college graduate suppressing all his talents, yeah. He found a way to go and change, become an advocate for taking control of